the general ethos of experimenting and building on Bitcoin. And it should be pretty fun. The discussion we're trying to have was attempted once before on a cruise ship earlier this year, and it didn't go so well. So maybe we'll have better luck this time. You all will need to turn on your mics. Yeah, we should be good to go. So you all know them, but if you want to open with a quick intro, say something to start us off, we can jump into the questions afterwards. I will add one more thing. On the screen here, Michael set us up with a live poll. So as we discuss, you can clear your answers and vote as many times as you want on the coin of your preference. Hopefully it won't get too distracting because we do have some good content. The previous presentations were a little bit more lighthearted, but maybe we can make this a little bit educational and constructive. So yeah, just go ahead and introduce yourself and we'll get started.
So guys, I'm Collin Enstad. I've been in Bitcoin since like 2013. Really dug into it about early 2017 when the BTC transaction fees went up, and then when Bitcoin Cash came out, I basically jumped right in because I thought big blocks were the solution.
Pham. I don't mine, I don't run a company, and I don't develop. All I do is pretty much sit in my underwear on Twitter and just talk a lot of crap. And I'm not sure why I'm here. And I think the reason why I'm here is because there is a vulnerability in the community regarding social subversion and attacks. And you may be wondering why I'm wearing a bulletproof vest. And the reason is that because I think I have made enemies of everybody in crypto, and I kind of want to be a wet blanket and be sober with people that the reason why crypto is combative is because it's a mimetic competition of being the one coin. And because of that, it creates rivalries where people actually have threatened other people. For example, Jameson Lopp has actually physically gotten swatted, where people called SWAT on his house during the fork war because, to be honest with you, there's billions of dollars on the line, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in companies that are making bets on this. And this is kind of social commentary that I'm trying to make about the realities of the toxicity of the space.
So Kevin, I'll ask a quick question. Do you think you perpetuate or try to mitigate the toxicity of this environment?
I come to realize that I am probably public enemy number one. And I've kind of come to the light of after seeing a lot of the vitriol that I put out come back to me and being on the other end of the spectrum because I'm kind of like a BTC defector now.
So you're a changed man.
Yes, or maybe I'm trying to make you, make BSV more attractive.
Okay. Daniel, anything before we get started?
I'm Daniel Krawisz. I have a show called Bitcoin Stuff, and I've been in Bitcoin a while.
Awesome.
I'd like to say one thing. Yeah. Could you possibly sit down too, be on equal footing with us?
I want to see all of y'all, so I might sit down for a couple questions. But the first question I want to start off with is obviously we're here to discuss the battle for Bitcoin, so it's a little bit important and obviously not an issue of small controversy to define what Bitcoin is specifically. Daniel, start with you and then just work our way down. Can you offer your definition of what Bitcoin is per se?
Okay. Well, so I used to define Bitcoin based on the Bitcoin Genesis block. And I would say that any tradition which derives from the Bitcoin Genesis block is Bitcoin. But since I have concluded which tradition I think is going to be the winner, I now define Bitcoin as Bitcoin SV, and that is the closest to the original white paper.
Do you still, in addition to that, subscribe to the idea that Bitcoin is the sum of all forks, or just exclusively SV?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that I think that Bitcoin is a tradition. Okay. So you have to talk about it in terms of the community of people, but it is also described as a set of rules in the white paper. So So this depends on whether you think this community of people, if they change their behavior, if they're still Bitcoin.
Sure. Kevin?
I define Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that is underpinned by a competitive transaction processing system. That's probably my first, and it's kind of changed because I did fall into the digital gold meme. The second one, I think, is more of a observational, empirical one that I see in BSV right now. It is a digital commodity that allows you to write transactions and data to a global distributed immutable ledger, permissionless ledger.
Okay, Collin.
Yeah, so Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. I think Bitcoin is defined as money, and I don't really agree on the whole commodity part. I think that can be extended via side chains and other things like that. As far as white paper, prayer, whatever you want to call it, Satoshi, he was a smart guy. He was not a good coder. I'm not a dev myself, but I hear it's a very messy language. And so I think the title is really what matters. There's been a whole lot of changes to Bitcoin, and reverting back to Bitcoin 0.1 is just a horrible idea. And I think basically just a peer-to-peer decentralized cash system is what Bitcoin is.
Okay. So I won't lie, I'm a little bit disappointed because all those definitions, well, Daniel's is a little bit controversial, but your definitions could apply to a lot of different forks and versions of Bitcoin. So I hope that we can dig into some of the more controversial aspects. But I do want to start with a question for you, Collin. Obviously, I'm sort of an unapologetic advocate for BTC Bitcoin, and yourself for Bitcoin Cash, and then Kevin and Daniel for Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. But to date, we have something like 70, 80 plus forks of the original BTC chain, and only 2 or 3 represented here on stage. Why is that? Why are only 2 represented here? Why are 2 only sort of like conventionally decided to be worth talking about?
I mean, one is obviously market cap.
Okay.
That's obviously a definition that people use. One is SHA-256 hash power. These are the only 3 forks that do carry that on still. And community, devs and community. Is there an active community developing or active community involved? Is there active developers actively developing it? Do people care about it? And you have things like Bitcoin Gold, which used to be SHA-256, and then they got 51% attacked, and now they're on, I think, EchoHash. And I mean, there's not really a community in Bitcoin Gold as far as I'm aware. So that's kind of why I think it's just these 3 at this point.
Okay, I think I know some Bitcoin Gold fans who would disagree with that. But to the audience really quickly, do we need to cover sort of like what forks are and the general topic we're covering here, or are you all sort of up to speed with the material we're discussing?
It's bear market crowd, I think.
Bear market crowd, okay, y'all are up to speed, great. So Daniel, on that note of why sort of, I mean, I would argue we shouldn't care about market cap, but in this battle for the title of Bitcoin or sort of a champion chain, what probability do you assign to any of these particular coins, maybe Satoshi's vision in particular, actually beating out BTC Bitcoin? And more specifically, how do you measure that contest? How do you decide who's the winner?
Well, first of all, market cap does matter because you don't have an infinite amount of attention. So it doesn't really make sense to pay attention to smaller market cap coins unless you have some kind of costly signal that tells you that you should. But what was the rest of the question?
How do you measure which chain wins necessarily in this battle for the title and sometimes the ticker Bitcoin?
Oh, right. The chain ends and then it loses. So the winner is the one that is still having more blocks produced.
So you expect some of these chains to actually not be mined or active whatsoever in any way and just die off completely?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Kevin, your history in this space is sort of a hard line Bitcoin maximalist, and you've pulled no punches, I should say, in going after Ethereum and now Litecoin and whatnot. And your pivot sort of to Satoshi's vision here, it has been maybe a little bit interesting. Can you sort of explain the process you went through in going from BTC to sort of riding the Satoshi's vision train now?
Sure. I think it was a lot of first it was a lot of self-reflection. I intuitively knew that I wasn't an expert or an authority in this space. I would just kind of parrot, kind of the narratives that were being perpetuated into the BTC community. And then I would go to, these like steak dinners, and people would treat me like a returning conquering hero. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like, why are you looking at me like I'm an authority? And I was like, these guys obviously don't know what they're talking about, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just, perpetuating the narrative that gets me the most, engagement. And, there was just like a lot of antisocial behavior. Like, I called out this whole steak maximalist thing. And I went to one of the barbecues, and I just bought vegetables because that's the type of person that I am. And nobody touched it. And I'm like, this is a cult. You guys are signaling allegiance to this religion by showing purity or whatever. And it was just, it was just like getting my spider sense going. So I was getting a little, weary of the space. And then I talked to Daniel, who was not allowed to come to the steak dinner. I said that let's get the Nakamoto Institute guys back together. Let's get the band back together. Daniel has been the thought leader in creating, the hyper Bitcoinization meme, also calling out app coins are snake oil back in 2014. And then just because he did not go with the orthodoxy or the consensus, he was ostracized by the Bitcoin community. And I said, well, as reasonable people, I think he should come to this dinner. And we should, just kind of, bury the hatchet and come together. And they said, no, he cannot come. And I reached out to him personally by myself just to have a talk. And we spoke like adults. And I fraternized with a Hold All Forks crew. And their thesis is that forks are different from altcoins because you are gifted or you are freely given or mirrored the same amount of Bitcoin or the UTXO set on every fork of Bitcoin. So therefore, it's not necessarily inflationary if you define the price of Bitcoin as the sum of all forks. And also, if you do not sell your forks, that prevents or that stops you from getting into that tribal mentality of the mimetic tribal tragedy that there can only be one Bitcoin, so then we are now rivals. Because there can be only one, so you're my rival now, you're my rival now, and online we're supposed to, duke it out and be enemies. Or is in person, like I love to be, I see you guys as friends. So that kind of brought me down. But if you hold all forks, you look at each fork as a parallel real-world Bitcoin experiment where we can test all these different features and assign a market value based off what the market is assigning these different forks. So you look at it in a very sober, objective way that these are just parallel experiments. This is the big block experiment. This is the small block experiment. This is the medium-sized block experiment. And if you hold all forks, you don't care which one wins because you know that eventually you'll be on the winner, as opposed to if you sell a fork, there's a chance you might be on the wrong one. So that mindset opened my eyes to BCH. And I find that from a psychological standpoint, if you do not have skin in the game in a certain cryptocurrency, you have a physical and mental resistance to trying to understand it. So having a little bit, of my holdings in Bitcoin Cash, kept an open mind to it. And also it's kind of a leverage thing to where if we only allow one developer team to say that, you are the main Bitcoin team, you have no leverage as an investor of having an alternative you can go to hold them accountable if you don't think they're doing the right thing. So I started with that mindset, and I kind of lost interest, and then this hash war thing came apart. I thought it was, because I know the BCH community, they're like very skilled in the art of war or whatever. They do a lot of surprise attacks, right? Like BCH just launched out of nowhere, and then the Coinbase pump, it's like, whoa, where'd this come from? And incidentally, that's when all the lawsuits and the CFTC reporting of insider trading. So those are the legal and social attacks that were happening to BCH because of this mimetic problems. Like Roger Ver has been like sued like probably so many times. He's been
Oh yeah, those are going places.
yeah. So he's been reported to the CFTC by the BTC community, and he's being sued by the BSV community for other reasons. So
Can I stop you here?
Sure.
So you say you left the BTC cult and now you're in the BSV cult?
Oh wait. So let me finish.
I did want to touch on that point because so I can understand from some degree sort of the toxicity of the BTC Bitcoin space. We have a lot of sort of big figures with big opinions. But so if I was very new to the space, was considering joining maybe the Bitcoin SV space, y'all also have sort of a very big, not so nice figure that kind of champions your coin around the world. And I'm curious.
Satoshi?
The real Satoshi.
It's his vision.
I'm curious if you can touch on that, maybe objectively kind of toxic figure a little bit.
Sure. So then I think the criticism is that it's a cult of Craig. And the thing is that I don't really care about Craig. Like, I don't see him as a leader. Like, I agree with a lot of what he says, and I think he's like very talented. And also, I believe that he was part of the founding team of that was Satoshi. But the thing is that I don't. The thing is that it took me so long to get over his antics to actually really focus on what he was saying, and he agreed with me. And I find it very ironic that BTC claims to be Bitcoin maximalist, where they support these friendly Bitcoin, these friends of Bitcoin like Monero and Ethereum Classic and Litecoin. And what I really think what happened was that limiting the block size pushed off all this economic activity onto these other chains, and supporting these Bitcoin maxes, supporting these friendly altcoins is them excusing or papering over them pushing off a lot of economic activity off the chain. So the thing is that it took me a lot to get over what Craig, all his antics were to actually get to it. So I don't like worship him. I just like looked at his arguments as opposed to his character.
But how can you take his arguments seriously when so much of what he says is just completely wrong and like a fraud?
Somebody can act stupid all day and still know what's valuable.
So, well, Daniel, I do want to ask you a question.
How do you distinguish that, though?
Based on something Kevin was talking about, because
it's your job to distinguish it. It's your job to pick the winner.
But on picking a winner, you champion sort of the agnostic hold all coins or hold all forks view for some of the reasons Kevin was describing, that the community is so important and some of these communities are toxic. Can you explain a little bit your investment thesis on that sort of heavily weights the quality of the community in deciding which forks to hold and how to invest and whatnot? And before you answer, I will comment that it's sort of technically impossible to hold all forks, so it's sort of like a best effort basis to try and hold as many forks as possible.
It is technically possible if you bought before the fork happened. But
disagree. But if you could comment on sort of the nature of how important communities are to your investments.
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is a social order. So that's it. That's the entire investment. And it's a social order that follows rules that are defined in the software that they use. So when there is a chain split, the community that exists decides which one to focus on. And the value arises from the people in the original community rearranging themselves into a new community that has picked one of the chains to be the new one that they all use. And so when the split happens, you can't necessarily know which one is going to win, because it's a decision that's made by everybody as a whole as time goes on. So what was the rest of the question?
You sort of answered it, just how important the quality of the community is. But I would challenge you a little bit. Wait. So quality
So a toxic community is bad, but that's not the only thing that's important, because Bitcoin is also an economy. So there has to be production taking place in the economy. And so once people have figured out which chain they like, then they're going to start doing more economic activity that is focused on getting more of the units on that chain. And that's what the valuable community looks like.
I see. Collin, so they've both sort of emphasized the importance of community, and maybe, if I'm not misrepresenting, sort of that would make or break the battle for Bitcoin on how good or bad the community is. Do you, like, looking at these chains and forks, do you sort of subscribe to that also, that the community is like maybe one of the most important things?
I'd say it's definitely important. I mean, really, we're looking at tech here, so I think the tech's the most important. Like, we haven't even touched on that. We talk about community, and we can dive into that at some point. But BSV community, extremely toxic to BCH. Extremely. You don't know how many names have been called, have been slandered. A couple people in here have been like just completely slandered just because we talk about BSV and we don't like it. And it's just absolutely insane, like so insane. And if we want to speak about BSV community, I've noticed a lot of originally they're all obviously Bitcoin Cash supporters. And you see all these like Twitter accounts that would pop up basically right around fork time, August 2017, and they're all gung-ho, Bitcoin Cash, doing all like Bitcoin Core sucks, all this stuff, and all of a sudden you see them all follow Craig, and all of a sudden this fork happens, and boom, they're all BSV. And you can go back, there's probably 50, 100 examples of this. And
that's because BSV is what people originally wanted when the split happened.
So do you think big blocks, just pushing big blocks through is the answer without fixing the bottleneck of mempool acceptance?
Yes, you have accepted lies, and you are in a communist coin. So yes, BCH is a centrally planned communist coin, so there can't be economic activity in it.
BSV is status then.
Kevin, what's up?
All right, so I need to add on to this communist coin. So I think that there is a error in the analogy that people are using for blockchains. I think the analogy that because people reason by analogy, is they look at it as a company. They look, who is the head, who is the CEO here, who's in charge, who makes the decisions. I think that the most accurate analogy to a blockchain is a country. So what happens is that, for example, the United States, there's a founding document, the Constitution, that we all agree to abide by, where we don't worship a president, and if a president violates the Constitution, that's grounds to have them removed, and that's what gives the citizens of the country leverage to oppose dictators. But every once in a while, there is a national emergency to where we need to suspend certain things in the Constitution in order to, avert, terrorism or whatever, and we can like spy on people without, due process. And what I find that happens a lot in crypto is there is an emergency, there is a big hack, like the DAO hack, or we are being attacked by the invaders, and then a developer makes a unilateral decision and breaks off from the social agreement that and the economic agreement that the community has agreed to. So when you violate the founding principles of the blockchain, you have assumed a dictatorial position to where there is no principles that we can hold the leader accountable. So Vitalik is basically the de facto dictator, where he forked off and everybody followed him. So then, and there's nothing to hold him accountable to, like some sort of standard. And then what happened with BCH is that they implemented rolling checkpoints
that was non-protocol level. That was on the exchanges only. That was non-protocol level.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it was a unilateral decision of the developer that completely screwed with the consensus process of proof of work. So
no, it didn't. It never was implemented.
Was it?
It was never, checkpoints were never used because the attacks never happened.
Let him finish. Well, I'm going to come back to you in just a second, but yeah, you can finish up, and then I have a couple things for Collin, and then we can.
And also, this comes down to the consensus. Consensus argument is who makes the rules here. I think in the BSV camp, we're very clear that the miners dictate the rules. One CPU, one vote per the original white paper.
You can only dictate if any one group gets 51%, and below, if there isn't a group with that, then nobody can dictate.
Collin, what's on your mind?
Apparently, I'm a communist now.
Correct.
It's are you a monarchist?
No.
So you don't think BSV is a monarchy?
No, it's a communist coin. Or no,
BSV.
BCH is, sorry. No, BSV is a capitalist coin.
So there's no leaders.
There are leaders in the sense of there are people who are farther ahead
There's a
than
hierarchy.
others.
Hierarchies naturally exist in nature.
So that hierarchy, there's somebody at the top, though.
There's a pecking order. There's not a hierarchy.
How is that not a thing in BCH?
How is what?
How is that hierarchy not a thing in BCH? On BCH, there's two node implementations. They're both about 50%. ABC and Bitcoin Unlimited. Bitcoin Core and BSV both only have one node implementation. So I don't know how you can. I mean, is that communist have two?
Well, so that's not accurate about Bitcoin Core, but I'm curious.
Well, there's obviously smaller ones. I'd say like 98%.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's about 80%. But so this whole discussion, the hierarchies and political theory and whatnot, and the whole reason we're having this fork discussion stems from the original thesis that, as Kevin mentioned, there's founding principles sort of that certain demographics try to subscribe to, those coming from the Satoshi white paper. So I sort of just want to run down the line here. Why the hell does Satoshi's vision matter? Or if you don't think it does, why not? But why does Satoshi's vision matter or not?
I mean, I think it matters in the fact that his vision was a peer-to-peer electronic cash that anybody can use. And from my perspective, BSV, they're miners. They're only mining BSV. Sometimes they switched over to BTC for a little bit, but nobody else is mining BSV. And so you got to wonder why. Are these people all working together? These pools didn't exist 2 years ago, and all of a sudden they popped up. And so 51%, one CPU, one vote. So if they're all colluding, I don't think Satoshi's vision was to...
The original rules of Bitcoin were designed by somebody who understood economics, and you should read... Ludwig von Mises, the socialist calculation argument. What happens in a socialist economy that's centrally planned is that the dictators just make up random nonsense that everybody has to go along with, and that's what SegWit and LTOR are.
So the original rules for Bitcoin also included a bug that allowed for infinite inflation, which isn't economically great. So if like, I'm curious to know specifically why, like Satoshi in particular, instead of maybe Hal or other people that came along very, very early on, like why is Satoshi so important? And maybe even before him, people who tried to experiment and succeed in the same task that he eventually succeeded in.
Well, it's because if miners are in competition to get more hash power, then it is also in their incentive to capitalize the economy.
Okay. Kevin, why does Satoshi matter?
I think the criticism is that it's kind of like religious, right? It's like, oh, this holy document, why are you guys,
sure.
Worshipping is it's just a document and things, maybe it's a living document and it should change. I think it's kind of a meme. But I think empirically it makes sense. I mean, so in order for the miners to mine in your chain, they need to generate as much revenue as possible to compensate, the amount of energy that they're burning. And I'm looking down the roadmap, and if BTC once the halvening happens, and the majority of the transaction fees are happening on Lightning, what incentive do the miners have to stay on BTC? Whereas BSV, they're scaling right now. They have 100 megabyte blocks, and their thing is that economies of scale are real, and that We're going to have very large volumes at very low fees, and mining is going to be in data centers, and they are the most rational stakeholder in what is the success of Bitcoin, because they are incentivized to promote the maximum number of economic activity, aka transaction fees, on chain, on the network.
Okay, Collin, I want to talk about Roger really quick, because I would be remiss if we didn't. He obviously gets a lot of flack from people on all sides of this, and maybe one point in particular is, so contrary to maybe certain narratives, people in my camp, the BTC Bitcoin, don't hate competition. More than anything, they sort of hate the branding, which is why we're here at the Battle for Bitcoin, that Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, which is sort of a non-technical ancillary thing. And then Roger made this Reddit post where he's sort of, in plain language, said that he's trying to market Bitcoin Cash as the real Bitcoin. Can you, I'm not asking you to defend that per se, maybe you hate it and disagree completely, and if so, I'd love to know why, but can you just share your thoughts on sort of Roger's behavior marketing Bitcoin Cash in contrast to Bitcoin?
Sure. Well, first off, I think all of the marketing arguments are null. This is a technology. They're complaining about marketing. They're complaining about a private company doing what they want to do. And as far as the real Bitcoin goes, these are all versions of Bitcoin. The real Bitcoin is up to a personal perspective at this point. And to me, Bitcoin is, again, a decentralized cheap money. And so Roger can do what he wants. It's a private company, and that's all I have to say about that. You can ask him about it.
The reason that people in BTC care so much about the name is because they have nothing of value other than that.
That's a hot take. I'm curious to know. I'm curious to know what of value Bitcoin Satoshi's vision has, like obviously excluding hash power, or institutional investment, or on-chain transactions, or market cap, or anything like that, relative to Bitcoin BTC.
Culture.
So ultimately, it does come down to. I'm sorry. So Collin, we were talking about technicals and how we're sort of very non-technical here, but it does ultimately for you come down to like the non-technical aspects of this, more so than the technical.
No, culture includes technology. But Bitcoin is a social order. Technology is a small part of it. Okay?
Okay, that makes sense. I want to start with you and then go down the panel here. We've sort of touched in a variety of different angles on why BTC Bitcoin sucks. If you could, if we could sort of rewind time and not have all of these forks, if you had power to change one thing, or maybe more than one, but just start with one thing about the BTC Bitcoin community or the chain or something, what would be your first adjustment that you would make that would keep you interested in BTC Bitcoin?
I would have invented N-Chain and CoinGeek.
Okay, Kevin?
I don't think you can change history. I think what happened needed to happen.
But go with my hypothetical here. If you could change one thing and we didn't have all this fork nonsense, what would you, like the drama and contention and whatnot, what would you change?
The block size. I mean, that's what the debate's all about. I mean, let's circle back to the tech here, because I don't think we've hit on that
I agree with you. I agree.
Yes.
So then limiting the block size is what pushed everybody off into the altcoins. Like BTC, people, they hate altcoins, but I'm like, you're the reason why they exist.
Okay, Collin, block size?
Yes, block size. And so circling back to the actual tech here, so BTC's, feel free to disagree with me, scaling solution is the Lightning Network, right? Would you agree with that?
Solution, yeah, sure.
A solution, right. And so the thing is, that's a second layer. There's Schnorr signatures coming to Bitcoin Cash in May, and that includes a malfix, which means you can do a Lightning Network on Bitcoin Cash. And really, you could connect into the BTC Lightning Network just through a simple atomic swap. Yep. And so...
Yeah, Lightning is protocol agnostic. You can use it on a variety of different chains.
Yeah, exactly. So there goes BTC's use case for me. I've used Lightning before. I think it's convoluted and not a scaling solution at all. And right now, I wonder... You said you don't think the mempool acceptance rate is the bottleneck right now, right? You don't think it is? You said it's a lie. I'm curious.
Oh, well, as Bitcoin grows, there's always there's always new challenges to overcome, right? That doesn't mean we have to change the rules.
Right. I mean, so right now BSV's marketing is big blocks, like huge blocks. That 100 megabyte block, none of those transactions hit a mempool. So they bypassed the bottleneck completely. There was a 65 megabyte block, and those hit the mempool, but that was only after 40 or 50 minutes. So there was 4 or 5 blocks worth of transactions in that one block, and that's where the bottleneck is. And so none of these BTCs doing their own thing. BSV's not tackling this at all. They're just doing big blocks however they can for marketing purposes. And I just don't see, unless BSV actually takes what BCH does, which might be the plan, to take graphene or take Xthinner and implement, I don't see BSV actually scaling properly.
So
concern trolling.
No, it's not at all.
Yes.
It's a valid concern.
I won't.
It is concern trolling.
I won't lie.
Capitalism means that people are incentivized to solve problems. Okay?
No, it means they're incentivized to make money.
So I won't lie, I'm
That
not
includes marketing.
incredibly technically literate on the block history of Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Satoshi's vision, but I do want to quickly circle back to the scaling differences you mentioned between Bitcoin Cash and BTC Bitcoin. Can you just, we are running close to time here, and I have one other question I want to ask before we close, but can you like briefly explain why you prefer like layer 1 scaling to be all or most of the scaling for protocol as opposed to Bitcoin's sort of layered scaling approach?
I mean, it's the base protocol. It's Bitcoin. Once you're on to a second layer, yes, it can be crypto. I can't say the crypto tied to the blockchain, but I mean, it's not the blockchain. And the reason we're into Bitcoin is to use a blockchain. We're not here to send our Bitcoins to some other thing, and the Lightning Network has its own problems like waiting for confirmations to actually open a channel and all that stuff. And so we're here for the blockchain.
I would love to dive into Lightning, but we're a little bit short on time. Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so before we go to Q&A, one last question, which may be a deciding factor in the battle for Bitcoin. Who should end up with the Bitcoin Twitter handle?
Me.
Okay. Daniel. Kevin, any ideas?
I don't think it matters.
You don't care? Collin?
I think taking it away from anybody that has it now is censorship. And we didn't even touch that at all. And I know you love that subject.
We did not, yes. Too little time.
Wait. There was a question that I wanted to answer that you sent me earlier.
Yeah, we didn't get to maybe half the questions I listed.
No, I want to answer it.
Go for it. What was the question?
The question was, should we care about exchanges having to deal?
Yes, because forks can create a nightmare for exchanges and investors and all sorts of things. Should we care about exchanges?
No. If an exchange goes out of business, somebody will start another one, and all the exchanges will die when Bitcoin takes over the world. So the exchanges are actually enemies of Bitcoin because they are opposed to Bitcoin's success, because they don't want to die. So exchanges should be treated like their lives are in Bitcoin's hands, and Bitcoin can kill anyone that it wants whenever it feels like.
So you think all cryptos are a zero-sum game? There will be only sort of one chain, not even just like a multiple fork.
Highlander.
Okay. So the voting is sort of stagnated over the last 10 minutes as we've gotten into a little bit more heated.
So I apologize. I don't know if we ran into a limit condition that I didn't foresee, but the poll is full and no longer accepting responses, so it probably maxed out at 50 or something. The poll, yeah, the poll is full. So
Why don't we just do a show of hands? Can we do a show of hands?
Sure. Show of hands for BTC Bitcoin. I mean, I'm not going to count. We'll just eyeball it. Show of hands for, do you prefer BCH or ABC? BCH. BCH Bitcoin?
It's asking if you prefer BTC or Core.
And show of hands for Satoshi's vision. Okay. Any super burning, so we are running low on coins. The
guy that Sybil voted for BSV? All right.
Any super burning questions on, yeah.
Wait, first I want to run the mic.
Yeah, so just wait for the mic before you start. But
so we can get more questions in. I would please say direct your question towards a panelist if it makes sense. And then try to have a quick answer so we can have multiple people.
What do you think is like going to be the role of like marketing and like the eventual like promotion or development of the individual coins? Like like Roger Ver like going like crazy about his own Bcash, or like Craig Wright going crazy about BSV, and how that impacts people's decisions choosing what coin to use.
Who do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll direct it to him, the person. Yeah,
Daniel.
Paul, right?
Yeah.
All right, Daniel,
okay.
you're up.
Okay, well, look at my talk earlier today. Marketing should be based on... So first of all, marketing is a bad word, I think, because Bitcoin is not a consumer good, so you shouldn't advertise it. Whenever somebody is selling Bitcoin and another person is buying, that there's a difference in which person believes that it has a future, right? Because the person selling thinks that it doesn't have a future, because that's why he's selling, right? So there's a difference. There's a difference in opinion about how good the coin is. So anybody who is marketing Bitcoin has a conflict of interest because he's selling it, right? And that he doesn't want it, right? So the way to attract people to your community is through costly signaling, not marketing.
Yeah. Can you actually expound on there can be only one comment that you made about Bitcoin?
One money is more valuable than
multiple.
two. The economy is more valuable if there's one unit and everybody is profit seeking in that unit.
I'm going to go back to the previous question about the marketing real quick. I think marketing is where we're at now, because I mean we have all these different Bitcoins, and to the layperson they're all the same. Obviously, BTC is most popular, so that's one most people are going to get. So at this point, it's just a matter of education and marketing. I disagree that you can't market it, because how else are we going to get people to onboard people?
Yeah. Try and make it quick.
So to show that BSV is not a cult, I actually disagree sometimes with Daniel. I think he may be too purist in his rational view of the world. What? So I was having a conversation with Paul and Kurt, who's a BTC Lightning maximalist, which shows that I'm willing to engage. And we talked about the ability to create social attacks or to subvert when there's two competing technologies. So let's say somebody has a lot of vested interest in a technology that's not superior, but they have more capital, they have certain ways to intimidate other people to where the best technology does not win out. And I want to have this as a warning to the community, because there are death threats. There are people that are swatting other people because there's billions of dollars on the line here. That to be conscious of these social attacks and these attempts to intimidate people, sometimes through violence. And the thing is that I'm very sober in knowing that there are Bitcoiners out there that have nothing to lose that are armed, right? So then, like, be aware of these ancillary attacks that can happen. Elite, somebody released a hoax that Vitalik died and the price crashed. So somebody empirically proved that if you can take out a leader, then and I assume nation states kind of do this as well, that you can take out your competitor. So I mean I want to warn the community that not everybody is rational and diplomatic. So it's a deeper thing about marketing, but I'm making you aware that these risks are very real.
Yeah,
don't invest more than when you're willing to lose. And if there are people around who've done that, you need to change your strategy, because you're better off if you are just trying to predict the real future than trying to promote your tribe.
I don't disagree with that. Do we still have the mic going around either? Yeah.
I want to try and do two more, but you have to do...
Quick answers. Got it. Yes, sir.
Every Bitcoin transaction creates a negative externality in the sense that every node in the network has to store that transaction forever, and every future node has to download it and validate it. Do you not believe that externality has to be constrained, or else it'll grow unbounded and your blockchain will regress back to centralization?
Who are we just going down the panel with that one?
Bitcoin Cash is kind of in the middle ground, I guess now, which is kind of weird. But basically, you're kind of asking about decentralization, who can run a node, right? And who can store it all in fast sync and all that. And so I would say that decentralization is a spectrum, and it doesn't mean like if you have 1,000 nodes, or if it's better than 900 nodes, you know? So I think it's just a matter of perspective at that point for decentralization-wise.
The only reason that a node would have to download the entire chain is that there are multiple chains. So after all the rest are killed off, then a node can simply look for the highest proof of work block. And then it will know that that is the last one.
Kevin?
I don't think home nodes matter. I think it's only about mining nodes and economic nodes. People who have a rational economic incentive to run a node. And empirically, I look into the real world, and I don't see this level of decentralization. I see economies of scale and a distributed system, whereas Bitcoin is a improvement upon the highly centralized banking system that has where the central bank has monopoly over it. Where this is it's a middle ground between pure decentralization and distributed system between enterprises and real businesses that are incentivized to run their own node.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll try to keep this short. Yes or no question across the entire panel. For the people on the PCH BSV camp, do you think that you will be able to scale to global adoption with absolutely zero layer 2? Yes or no? And on the flip side, for people that support BTC, do you think you'll be able to scale to global adoption using only layer 2, keeping block size at 1 megabyte?
I'd say scaling without layer 2 would just never happen because things like Coinbase is layer 2. You will always have off-chain transactions. So,
yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wow. So just to be clear, when you said absolutely, you're answering as the BTC, saying
as BTC, yes, layered
small,
scaling.
layer 2.
Exactly.
When you
keep the blocks
yes,
small. Smaller blocks would be better.
Okay. That was a very interesting way to end it. Thank you so much, guys.
Is that great? Well, thank you guys for coming, answering my questions. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well.